Hi, Ellen. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Liz. I'm super excited to be here.
So, how do we know each other?
Well, we've known each other now for, I think, about 24 hours officially. I met you through my new mentor, who I believe was your professor many moons ago. And we lucked out that he was correct that we would hit it off.
He has a knack for this. The number of amazing people that he has introduced me to is it's unbelievable. And it's just pure generosity on his part. He is so good at detecting resonance between people, much more than just mere commonality or similarities on a resume, but actually understanding what makes people tick and finding that resonance in two people or more and then introducing them to each other in a very open, non-threatening way. And you're right. He was my professor many moons ago, Dr. John Reed, shout out.
Shout
He
out.
was he was my first psychology professor. I took or International Dimensions of Organizational Behavior as part of my MBA. I had never taken a psych class before, and it was like realizing I had been missing out on something my whole life, and this was it. He encouraged me to get a PhD, but it took me about 11 years from the time he first suggested it until I actually started. So there's no such thing as too late, and the opportunities will be there. It doesn't mean that they won't take sacrifice or that there won't be challenges along the way, but it wasn't an impossibility, even though time had passed. So, yeah. And when he said y'all should know each other, of course I jumped at it because he's never wrong. And when we spoke, I mean, it's hard for me to believe it's only been 24 hours because it feels like we've known each other forever. It's just we don't talk very often, like, for our whole lives.
Yeah. As we were saying earlier, I tell people all the time, time has no meaning now. So everything just feels weird. So I say embrace it. I, why not? Your description of John also, thank you. Another shout out for him. Just spot on that generosity. And he did also say that talking to you, you would encourage me to get my PhD, which has happened more than once already, which I appreciate because that is something someday, I hope. And realized this morning something you might appreciate. I graduated, I'm going to age myself right now. I graduated from undergrad in 2006 and I got my master's in IO Psych in 2016. So I am, in fact, 11 years later, due, if I continue this path, to get another degree in 2026. So I would need to get started like right now. I'm going to stay on the same page. It's a
Oh, I
pattern.
think that's an excellent pattern to recognize and to step into.
I will. I do. I guess every 10 years I change career paths or I do some sort of pivot. So I'm due, which is why I have a business now, but it is due.
I just keep discovering more things where I'm like, oh, we have that in common too. I want to hear more about that. But before we get to that, I want to hear more about time has no meaning. Air that out.
Oh man. I think post COVID, right? I just keep saying nothing. We literally broke time, right? So when I say this to folks I'm checking out at CVS and I say time has no meaning and it resonates with everyone I talk to. There's actually research coming out now that there are things about time that are breaking. For example, where the earth is spinning faster, but more in a conceptual way. I think COVID has fundamentally broken our concept of certain things and time is one of those, is my opinion. Probably that happened sooner and COVID sped it up. And so things just don't feel the same way that they did before, right? And to some degree, everything that humans created a concept. So you can say anything has no meaning and it's just made up. But there's definitely something universal that everyone's feeling right now around what time is. I would imagine it's a lot like when folks started having to actually have shifts and during the Industrial Revolution. And you're like, wait a minute, Spock. There's something very strange happening to all of us around what the concept of time means, which is just a wild thing, but we all feel it. Everyone agrees with that statement. It's fascinating.
A few things you said. The first one, you mentioned the Industrial Revolution. The other thing is that child labor laws gave us teenagers.
Oh,
So
yeah.
before child labor laws, childhood and adolescence weren't actually a thing.
Mhm.
Childhood was shortened and you went to work. And either you went into the fields with your parents and you were an agricultural worker, or you went into factories. Very, very few young people actually had what we think of now as this adolescent period. And thanks to child labor laws, we now have teenagers. And it's fascinating to me how what happens in our political and economic structures affects what happens in our social lives as humans. And when you talked about time and COVID, something I've been thinking about for a while is that COVID acted like both a pressure cooker and a microwave.
Mhm.
So when you think about cooking, which I love to do, both think about and cook, I think about how there's really nothing like the Sunday roast, right? That, sorry for all the vegans and vegetarians listening, you could do the same thing with like a really lovely root vegetable. But stick with me here. There is just something that time and heat make magic. And it's also true with diamonds. Carbon, enough time, enough heat, enough pressure, you get diamonds. So with cooking, we often think of the slow cooker. And over time, things go from kind of raw to melded and tender and delicious. COVID, in many ways, was sort of like both a microwave and a pressure cooker. So with a microwave, you excite all the water molecules, and that allows you to cook food much faster. With a pressure cooker, you change the pressure, so you change the temperature at which water will boil, and you're able to speed up cooking time. So you get roughly the same result you would get with a slow cooker or a Dutch oven in a fraction of otherwise what it would take you. And when I think about how COVID transformed working, so we had more remote workers. In fact, pretty much we had almost exclusively office workers as remote workers. That was speeding up technological advances in how we collaborate and work together and communicate, how we project manage, how we deal with workflows. It forced all of these rapid developments that, had we gone along with our usual slow cooking, probably would have taken somewhere between 10 and 20 years to all come to fruition. But instead, we had to do it in a dramatically short period of time. And so some things got put in the microwave and some things got put in the pressure cooker. And the thing about a pressure cooker is that it will produce a result that is much similar to the slow cooker than the microwave. Nobody wants a roast chicken out of a microwave. And so, unfortunately for us, many of the things that we wanted to be the equivalent of slow cooked got microwaved. And beneficially, many of the things that we wanted in terms of rapid advancements in technology, in new ways of collaborating and working together, bringing people into the workforce who otherwise might not be able to participate because they were not able to physically be in an office. Well, those are things that essentially got pressure cooked. And so as you talk about time being broken as a result of COVID, I think of it more as our tools for manipulating time changed. And the result of that is that we have some tools that were used, the microwave, which is great if you need to reheat your coffee, but terrible if you want to cook fish. So now we're in a place, I think, where we need to look at the technology that we have and how that can power our advancements from a social, political, and economic perspective, and really be thoughtful about which ones are the equivalent of the microwave and which ones are the equivalent of the pressure cooker, and decide what goes where. What tools do we use for the different purposes because they need to fit the purpose? And then also, what things do we just let sit in the oven? And that's a piece where I see a lot of negotiation happening in our world, particularly in the working world, around how do we now manipulate time because we have tools that will do it. And generative AI is another example of a tool that allows you to essentially manipulate time.
Absolutely love that metaphor. I had to mute because I was cracking up at a few examples. And I think you're totally right in that it did speed up the way we manipulate time. I absolutely love that. The other piece, as you were talking about coming back to the office, there's the piece that I focus on, stick to it to myself, but I think for a window there, actually thought about how human beings actually think and react. And we made space for that. And right now we're seeing this pushback as people go back to the office to trying to go to what happened before. And that's been unpacked a million times, but it's still missing that piece. And it's where things like organizational psychology come in, and the elements where you can't fully control for human beings' behaviors and personalities. And I would argue shouldn't. That's what our beauty is. So you're not trying to, risk mitigate out humanity and humanness. It's about how do you balance the two? Because when they're in good balance, and that's where some of these amazing new tools can actually help do that, as we talk about, which ones do we want to microwave? I love that. How do you use those to power a new version of work that allows both of those worlds, right? And it matches what that company and those people need. And we're in a unique spot where you can do that right now. But a lot of the conversations focus on one side or the other and not all of them coming together and what actually fits the end goal for individuals, companies, humanity. What do we need out there?
What do you think we need?
Space to be humans. I actually think we need more of the biggest thing I think folks need is to know that what makes them unique is probably their superpower, and that you need the investment in directing that and knowing how to use it strategically, not a, immediate, just, okay, cool. Everything about you is perfect. Go. But our unique experiences give us a unique insight into the world. They give us unique skills. How can you take that piece and then build systems and align people to systems so that it's still successful, so that it's probably, in fact, even more successful? There's a lot of ways that people and process and systems and workplaces are in conflict that they don't need to be. And I think those are the pieces that if they don't have to be in conflict, why are they? Like, let's start figuring out how that can work better for the employees and the companies. Because in the end, the conflict's on both sides. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
So you used a word that you used when we spoke for the first time, superpower. And I'm really fascinated by what you said to me about your superpower, because your superpower relates to helping other people find their superpower. And I want to hear more about that. Talk to me about superpowers.
Superpowers. That is, in fact, my superpower, which is I see the unique element of what kind of excites and defines people. And then I also have refined that to the point where I really love helping people match that up and look at that as an asset and how you can use it. And that, I think, is where our power lies right now as people. And as somebody that was a manager, that was one of the key things to help coaching my folks. So for me, superpowers are what I call actually Youness, Youness, but it's that unique combo of elements that are you, that are making up your unique experiences, your perspectives, and your ability then to connect things together that other people might not. And that together is such a fascinating power. It's really based in letting you look at yourself as the entire human you are, not mom you, work you, friend you, which we talked about, I think, in social media when it started off and we were so hopeful. That was a big thing, right? Like, people could have different personas or they could combine their personas. But there's a gap for all of us in how to define that and use it. And that's where I really help people is what is that? What is that resonance? What is that string that we should pull on? And when you're telling your story where you got really excited, that we should be like, well, why? Why was that so exciting? Or why was that tone suddenly different in the story when we were talking? What is that piece? And that's usually the start of where we find thing that is uniquely you. I have a great mentor, now friend, who I worked with at Google, and she described this concept as it's something that we all know, we feel it, but we can't describe it. And this is very much that. It's when somebody goes, oh my gosh, that shirt is so you. It's that same underlying theme and then applying that to, okay, great. Well, we live in a society where you need to make money. What's underneath that we can then apply to that world to move forward like that?
So many things I want to pick up on, but I want to start with this one, which is how did you discover this is your superpower? When did that become a thing for you?
Such a good question. I think I actually drew out my career journey at one point to try to figure out where these pieces came together. And I think it came together piecemeal. And then it began to take structural form when I actually had the words for it, which is when I went back to grad school and studied organizational psychology and began to see how these concepts fit. And it gave me an understanding of how we are at work and why I was so interested in the things behind the scenes. But I think actually, and this is true for most people I've worked with, if you have the opportunity to be able to choose roles and move around and choose projects, people tend to choose projects that are in line with what their superpowers are. I'm a Gallup Clifton Strengths certified coach, and I use StrengthsFinder a lot because I love it as the foundational research base for people, because it really does it starts with folks thinking about what they're great at and why, and we don't do that. That is just not something that we all get to do very often. It's not something that then even if we do that, it's more like gold star. And then to be able to take that and strategically use it, I think that's another key piece. So when I learned about that, oh my gosh, 10 plus years ago, that stuck in my brain. And when I look back at my career and life, there are these pivot points where I learned some sort of topic or idea, or I worked with someone and they said something that slowly built together. And then finally I had the framework to define that, like, oh, this is the thing I do for people that's actually useful.
And I wonder as well about how your vocation as a guide and a cheerleader, I'd never, until we spoke, I had not really thought about the role of recruiter as both coach and cheerleader, and as sage, in some ways as oracle. You are helping people to identify what it is about them that is a unique promise of value, which is another way of saying their brand. And then draw that out and help them identify where that brand value best fits in the organizations that they want to be a part of. And I've thought of jobs similarly to the way that I thought about going off to university when I graduated high school. I had many people around me who were upset for very good and entirely understandable reasons about not getting into a particular school. And my feeling was that if a place didn't want me, I didn't want it. I want to be in places that want me. And in order for us to figure out the right places for us to be, we have to know who we are. We have to know our story. We have to know our superpower. And then we need to understand how that translates into the superpower and the culture of the organization, because it's achieving that fit that means that we'll all have success. So I'm curious how you have grown from recruiter into coach, sage, mentor, cheerleader, oracle, guide, all of it.
I love how you put that. And yes, and it is very much knowing your superpower is much like a brand. I think the term brand it has gained so much and lost so much, if that makes sense. And so I think this is a piece where, yes, that's part of it. And I love that. I think a lot of times people think of brand as only the visual, and you're right. But it's deeper than this. And it is doing that strategic thinking to pair person you with what is needed on the other end. I think I have a very strange and unique background. I love it. I have career switched, I would argue, a few times now. And so I think that's what's given me the ability to pull worlds together, because today, especially for job hunters, it's the brand piece, it's the strategic thinking piece of, who's looking for what I offer, where is that? And there's also a systems and technology piece. And I have experience and expertise across all of those. And particularly during times of quote unquote unprecedented change. So I started my career in a media planning and emerging media roles. And so I was at at that point, one of the largest media companies in the world, or the largest actually at that point. And I lucked out that I got on a team that was doing emerging media recommendations for Disney parks. And it was just the coolest job. And I got to research cable companies and video on demand, and again, aging myself, but had to think through strategically, what is this platform? What's Disney Parks' goal? Let's think about how the goal of a brand like that is to be visual and to experience it, right? Like it's magic. So does this match with that? And it was such a great initial foray into the working world. I was so lucky there. And then I worked to a more traditional role, which gave me a lot more structure, but it was Bank of America. And I joined the team transitioning the win about 3 months before the financial crisis. And so late on a Friday afternoon, we got a phone call asking us to pull a media plan together of everything they had running over the weekend. No idea why, which was a lot. And we came back on Monday to discover the reason why. And that sort of was the beginning of how I seem to have been in very aligned positions through major changes in the world. I stayed in that space. I was lucky enough to pivot back and work with the amazing Rashad Topakawala and his team at that point, Danu, and then zig-zag on, again, emerging media things. What is this social media? Should we have a Facebook page? Facebook ads, building out the first trainings for Facebook ads for media buyers and stuff that just feels so wild now. And that set me down a path for a while, for almost 10 years. And then I realized in a meeting one day, I was a director at a PR agency and working on some digital stuff. And I just realized that this wasn't my thing. And I worked on an Olympics plan, and the plan, what fascinated me for my client was what our team had come up with. To be honest, I just got to watch on how we could have done, it was the Sochi Olympics, executed social media updates and such in a way where the client was on the ground there and we were back here in Central Time and able to let people sleep and able to not spoil the post and not ruin things for people. And what is that strategy? And it was just so incredibly thoughtful at so many levels. And that has stuck with me since. I just remember sitting in that presentation that my supervising associate, the associate supervisor was giving, and I just was blown away both by her and just this concept. And that was what started to pivot things. And I learned about organizational psychology and that's what I need to learn about. I need to know more about that. And got into the Chicago school for my master's degree and realized I needed to get a job that wasn't, 80 hours a week if I was going to be in school, and was lucky enough to end up at this boutique staffing agency, just creative staffing, who liked to hire people out of the industry and train them versus hiring folks that had been recruiters. And so I got a very different perspective. And I think that lucked out as well, right? I kept finding these points where my superpowers aligned with what companies were looking for. And it's been such a journey. And I actually left there, worked at my friend's startup, and then went back when I finished my degree and came back in more of a operational and recruiting director role to help build out more structure in the company. And absolutely loved that job, loved the brand message of that company. It was incredibly thoughtful, incredibly consistent. And I got to learn all about things like human-centered interactions and design thinking and all these things that were just very new in the larger corporate and educational world around creative work. And then Google found me. And so that's how I ended up in more of a true recruiting organization. And eventually there, I also moved back into the operational side. And so I was there during COVID. I was there for sending everybody home and for bringing everyone back. When we were bringing everyone back, I was in the interview operations team. So we were trying to figure out how to schedule interviews once we had people in the office and not in the office, but I was also a manager. So there's the whole side of that. And then I also, am a human being. And so I was going back to the office and I love going to the office. So I'm a very extroverted person, but the journey of all of that, watching that from all those angles, from inside a company, as a manager, as an individual, also really stuck with me. So yeah, I've gotten the chance to pull it all together in different ways. And so since I've done it myself, I feel like I was like, okay, well, maybe I can help others with this. And I have a lot of past reports and colleagues that attested to me that I should do it. So I pulled it all together and this is where we ended up.
So where's that?
Oh, great question, Liz. So at the beginning of this year, launched my own, I'm calling it a people success consultancy. This is a newer term that's out there around kind of the same ideas as customer success, but for the other parts of a business that are important people interaction points. And it's called Eunice, which is the woman's name. I almost forgot how to spell it. Eunice, based on my concept of Youness, Youness, that I came up with, oh gosh, probably a good 10 years ago. And everyone always mishears it. So I figured, you know what? Let's own that. Let's keep that. And it has stuck. And I work with folks to make work suck less, basically. So it's either for you as the individual, let's tell your story. Let's figure out identify this Eunice piece. Right now, I'm very heavily focused for folks in job hunting because of the market, but I also have a few folks I'm working with that are doing a longer, more strategic play with that and just thinking about, okay, I like my role. I think I am aligned, but what's next 5 years down the line? How do I use this to proactively pivot? Because the real power in knowing your superpower, your Eunice, your story and how to tell it is it gives you power right now. If you're job hunting or trying to move for a promotion, right? You would get that language and that understanding, but it gives you resilience down the line, regardless of what happens in your job, in the market, what's happening in the world around you. It is your new North Star for decision making, for what's right for you, for, how you can easily talk to someone about, oh, I can or can't do that, or I have done that, or here's where the part I can do. It's all, and like where I recommend somebody else. Like it gives you this level of strategic authenticity almost, where it sounds a bit predatory, but I mean it in more of a, you get to decide what about you share, when you share it, with who, how you talk about that. And that's the only control most of us have these days in the job hunting world or job world, period. So that's where I focus on helping people define that.
You said something in there that I found that I want to dig into. You made a reference to how the market is now, and it sounds both vague and ominous. And I'd love to get your insight into the hiring market right now because I'm in a very weird spot where I don't feel like I have a particularly good pulse on it because I haven't gone looking for a job pretty much my entire life. I have serendipitously found myself in roles and I continue to. And I'm extremely fortunate in that I continue to experience inbound demand for what I do, which I still can't necessarily encapsulate in a neat brand statement. Although I appreciate recently I've had people describe what I do in two ways. One, I had a guy say, she's a fixer, which is partially true. It's certainly true. And then the other person referred to me as adult supervision. And I felt like that was a pretty good description as well. But I'm curious, what is your insight into the market right now? What do you see and where do you think things are going?
Before I jump into the market, you had a great point there, Liz, about you can't necessarily define your brand in a brand statement, but people have defined it for you in these great terms like fixer. And I think that actually you hit on exactly what this idea of Eunice is. It's that vibe that's you that is very hard to articulate. And I think that is enough of a solve for people. So if people take anything away from our conversation, I want them to know that that is good enough and that is powerful. I always joke that I'm a manager at heart. I like helping people. And so I'm really that's who I am. But we all have those roles where we come in and, anyway, I love that. That's very much in line with what this idea of Eunice is. I think the big power too is if somebody else can say something like that about you and it is spot on, then you have done a great job of getting what your brand, product value, whatever you want to call it, out there is. That's partly why I made up a new word, because I don't think any of the existing concepts properly capture what I think we need right now, which is that human first, market second perspective. We can get into that as well. So in terms of the market right now in the job market, yes, I hear from a lot of folks, particularly if you're somebody that has not historically needed to job hunt. It's very intimidating. And to be fair, everyone is having a pretty terrible time. And by everyone, I actually mean the entire ecosystem: candidates, recruiters, interviewers, hiring managers. It is uniquely painful to hire. I think I will say with a little positiveness, I think it's getting a bit better even in the last few months. The sudden influx of tons of people getting laid off. So we had that period where there were so many white collar layoffs, and then you had everything happening with Dodge and the government. All these people bumped into the market at the same time, obviously compounded the issues already there. But the problem is less a lack of jobs or a lack of job hunters. It's the infrastructure to finding and connecting people with jobs and vice versa has collapsed. It is systems that are built with a certain assumption of how people are job hunting, with an assumption of certain technology that it's all changed in different ways. And it makes me think of going back to the microwaves and pressure cooker metaphor. The same things are happening at a micro level and a macro level inside hiring and companies. And so much influences the job market and how we truly do the market aspect of it. That's where the breakdown has occurred.
To what extent do you feel that the current focus on AI augmentation in the workplace is a true threat to people's jobs? And how much of it do you see as hype?
So AI and job hunting is such a hot topic, and in jobs in general. I think there's two pieces to it that has actually really surprised me as I've been doing this work. It's both a threat and hype. I don't think that most AI tools are even close to being able to replace humans in most roles. And I don't actually think we would necessarily want that. And so functionally, I think it's hype in that sense, and that there is a great opportunity for these tools to help humans be more efficient or scale. And that's a whole thing that I'm really interested in. How can these tools superpower individuals to make them more efficient, to make work suck less, all of those great things. On the other end, there is also the truth that people are losing their jobs because of AI. And it's not because the tool can do it. It's because a company or a leader or whoever has decided it can do it. And so the cascading effects are occurring. So I think it gets back to the fact that we don't think about how people and their emotions and their thought processes and the various things that push us to make decisions impact systems inside companies like that. So more of what I'm seeing is a hope that AI will replace people as a company versus an actual ability for it to do it, which may get me in trouble with some companies. But that is in general what I'm seeing.
What is the advice that you're giving to job seekers right now?
My biggest advice for job seekers right now: follow what I consider the three big buckets for job hunting. So the first one is your positioning. You have to know what you offer and how to articulate that. It doesn't have to be super in depth, but you need to know what are you looking for and why are you uniquely great for that. The second piece is then your content has to show that, right? So that's your resume, your LinkedIn, all of that. And then you need to have a system in place that works for you. And all of that stuff has to be connected. The great thing is that once you get one piece done, which is the positioning, you should always start there. The other stuff falls into place much more easily. And that is a great spot to use a tool like ChatGPT or another AI copywriting tool. So you've done the briefing type of work, right? Like when you tell it who you are, you are having it help you better say that. You're not making things up or just letting it do the thinking for you. And so the number one thing I tell people is if you're going to invest time, start there and then use tools to help you build out good strategies and that sort of thing. But you have to start there. The other big piece is that your resume has to do double duty to read for computers and for humans. So that's the other big piece. It's just very tactical. So make sure it is formatted in a way that can be read, but remember that in the end, it's a human making the decisions. And then my last piece of advice for job hunters is the human feeling piece. 90% of the time, maybe more, if you're ghosted, you don't hear back, you're rejected, all of the awfulness that happens because it is a horribly demoralizing process right now. It is not you. It is not you personally. It is not your skill set. It is not that you don't bring anything to the market, that you aren't hireable. There's all these storylines I hear from people having been on the inside and the outside. So often it's a process thing, a breakdown inside. The job went away. The hiring manager left. The recruiter got laid off. They lost your email. It's just a really sad truth that the system is so broken that you're going to get a lot more of those black hole rejections. And you have to find your way to believe that it's not you because it's not, but believing that is very different than just saying it out loud.
That actually loops back to the thing that I said we would definitely come back to, which is a statement you made that really stuck with me. You said human first, market second. Can you talk more about that? Because that's really interesting to me.
Yes. And so yes, human first, market second, I think is the foundational piece of this framework I have of approaching personal and career development. If you look at most advice, career support, marketing guidance, all of those things, how to build a brand, how to build a personal brand, almost everything starts with go and look and see what the demand is in the market. And that doesn't work with people because people aren't products. We can't develop you into something else that you aren't. You can refine and pivot and all that stuff, but it just doesn't work that way. And secondly, what a depressing way to have to look at the world. And that is what most of us have been dealing with, right? It's how can I optimize myself more? What did I do wrong? How can I be more resilient? When we know the problem is more likely in the systems or in institutions or things like that. And so this is a way of saying you can't change that. And it's even worse now, but you do have power in knowing who you are. So start from that and look at your whole self, as companies talk about, but take care of you first. Look at your advice, like build that out for yourself. And then strategically, this isn't, a kumbaya only moment, but strategically use that to find the roles that are right for you, to advocate for that promotion, to just that confidence to know where you're going. And I say this because I needed to go through this myself. I've had these moments and I've made decisions that were the day to day of the job. I took a 50% pay cut to go to that staffing agency, but I had this bigger vision for where I wanted to go. And I think the only thing that really kept me on that and not, miserable is I knew I was going that way. And there's a lot of power in knowing who you are, what you're working towards, and not at the same time being stuck inside the systems and those structures you're in. So that's what I mean when I go human first. Like you are key. Then you can navigate the market and the world around you, not change yourself to fit into it.
You sound like an ambassador of agency.
An ambassador of agency. I love that. And that's actually very true. I feel like I say this to folks, my biggest desire is to make work suck less for people. And the big piece of what makes work suck is not the work. It's stuff around the work. And agency is such a great word to describe what we lose and when work starts to really hurt. I say, and sometimes this gets me some trouble, but I call it anywhere else. If this wasn't happening in a corporate or work environment, you'd consider these things emotional abuse. The things that we had institutionalized and considered normal. Not everywhere, obviously. We all have some great places we've worked in. I hope everyone's had some great experiences. But it is agency, and it gives you back your humanness, your power, your difference, and you can go, okay, I will do this thing that it's not ideal, but I know that it's for my longer term goal. And I did a lot of this coaching, especially when I was helping my reports and other Googlers around, something happened at the company that you no longer liked it, or it's changing, or vice versa, right? Like you really loved it there and you're hearing all this hate from other folks. And, it's hard because we get all these messages all the time. Your guiding star is how you feel and where you want to go. You're always going to hear other messages, and it's easy, very, very easy to get knocked off. And so that is where this power comes from.
And I think that's what makes it so powerful, is that it's not an external power. It's a power that people have within them. And in the coaching aspect of it is helping people to unlock that power and to step into their power and to recognize that it is, in fact, theirs. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how we started off talking a bit about social media and how it became a data economy and people as products. We are the product when we give up our data for free. If we are using some tool or some service and there is no charge, we are the product in commercial settings. And when you talked about being able to have choice about how much information you share, how you curate the information you share, how you decide who has access and who doesn't, that is the crux of the data sovereignty movement. The idea that human beings should own our data. We should have control over how that data is collected, how it's stored, how it's used, how it's monetized, how it is fed back to us. We deserve that agency over our most fundamental information. And I think about the recent case of 23andMe and the bankruptcy. And there you have millions of people's DNA on an auction block to pay off creditors. And we don't always think about the far-reaching implications of how our data is being used, and then also how we become commoditized and productized in that process. And human beings at work is such a fundamental part of being human. And I don't mean paid employment. I mean having something where we do a service, we make something, and there's meaning in that for us. It gives us purpose. Work is fundamental to who we are as human beings. Paid employment is something different. So I think as you were talking, I was considering how important it is that we put the emphasis on empowering people to identify what about them is the uniqueness that they bring to a workspace, a work environment, and how then do they express that uniqueness in a way that contributes value to the organization. And because we live in capitalism, it provides a return to them. It provides an income to them. But how do we find ways of helping people to connect their purpose and meaning with their work? And it sounds like you're in the thick of that, and that really is your superpower, helping people to do that.
I love all of that. I agree. Thank you. First of all, I love hearing. I do hope that I can help people find their superpower and use that to make work more meaningful to them. And I agree. Work in a sense of creation is so central to all of us. And knowing, even in the smallest way, that we're going to be helping someone or making something a little bit better, that can really change your entire experience at work. And that's the kind of conversations I love to get into with folks, because in the end, your superpowers, your Eunice, who you are, is not this giant, doesn't need to be, I should say, this giant statement. Every person is already fascinating and interesting and having an amazing combination of things, right? That's the nature of being humans. And this is about how that can be used in a way that is productive, whatever that means to you and is valuable to you. So I love that you touch on that. And there was a piece also around talking about data. I love the point. Yes, I think there's a lot of conversations right now where the control and agency lives between individuals and organizations, corporations is happening everywhere. Data is a great example of that. It's happening with going back to the office, right? Like, are you actually having me come back because it's needed in my role, or is it a power play? And all these different places where there's just a massive struggle, and it really is over agency and choice and trusting adults to be adults and all of that. And having been on the HR side and an employee, I see why both sides are concerned with what they're concerned with, for sure. And so that middle ground is what we're all searching for. But the piece about how our data is served back to us, particularly when we talk about social media and Eunice and human and trying to live in our worlds and survive, I think about this a lot because the system, the algorithms, however we want to blame it at the moment, which is all true, but we are served more and more content that tells us we're wrong. But it's in these little micro doses, right? It's like, here's a little thing you should worry about. Here's another little thing you should worry about. Here's another thing did you know you're doing this wrong? Oh, did you know you should worry about this thing? And we talk about it a lot in beauty, but if you step away and come back to a platform, I think a lot of times you can see where it shows up just everywhere. And I speak of this we talked about this yesterday. So I have a almost 2-year-old, and I remember all the things that I worried about when I was pregnant. And I went off social media for a while because, I had a newborn and life is wild. And I went back on and I was still following all of these feeds for moms pre-baby. And it hit me so hard just how much I felt like I wasn't doing things right suddenly, or I was feeling ashamed. And just the way the underlying message in all of that was, you're doing something wrong. Did you know about this thing that was wrong, even though no one's brought it up? It's very dangerous and wrong. Luckily, I have a solution to sell you. And that is just a constant message we get. And then you go back to work, where we spend a vast majority of our day, and are usually told, oh, you need to work on this. Oh, you didn't quite hit this, or like, stop doing this, or even stop working so hard. And so there's just no way to win. And so there's also this just ongoing underlying drumbeat of you not being good enough. And I think we're far past the point that affirmations are enough for folks. Like, you can, like we have probably always have been, but we need a counter message in the market that no, you don't have to be perfect. You can take who you are is great, and here's how you apply that in a way that's actually great. Not platitudes, not empty things. Like, this is about authenticity and real strategy. We're all tired, I think, of the BS and the angle and all of the extra stuff. We just want to find our spot in the world and enjoy this short life we have and be productive and valuable to our communities, because that's who humans are, and not have to deal with all this made up extra drama and pain, etc. And that's what I want to create more of, and find people to help me create more of, and just make that space.
So who do you want to be seeking you out right now? Who do you want to be talking to?
I would love to talk to folks that want to work through this with me, but also folks that are out there, people like yourself, that are looking at this from other angles. We're all touching a piece of it, right? We're all looking at part of the pie, and there's so many ways we can all help forward this mission of letting more of humanness come out in ways that are beneficial and build. It's so easy to destroy. So folks that are looking for those opportunities, who want to talk deeper, I really am on a search to figure out, to some degree, as I launch this business, what's the market need? Where would people like help? I'm using a lot of AI in what I do, but in a way that's incredibly transparent. And I'm learning about, how do you build that out ethically? How do you work with people so that it's a tool that builds up humans versus like replaces? And how do you do that with also an eye to business, and also as people thinking that way? So there's so many pieces that are coming together. I love this early stage bit where I get to pick a path. So anybody that wants to talk more about all of this stuff, I would love to hear from them.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for this. This was really fun. And again, I still don't believe that we've only known each other for like 26 hours. Like, that's just not a thing.
So we said, do you know it's John's birthday? John Lee?
Oh my gosh. Happy birthday, John.
Yep. Happy birthday, John.
And we got the present.
My gosh, we did. He'll be so happy though. I feel like he lives for helping lift others, which is we need more of those humans in this world, or more space for, I think there are tons of those humans actually. We need more spaces for those humans to do that, you know?
And that's the perfect note to end on. Thank you, Ellen.
You're so welcome, Liz. Thank you.